Okay, let's start. So this is going to be our week 11 of the lecture called Foundations of Social Sciences. We have, as far as I can see, 3 more weeks to go. So after 3 weeks, we will conclude our lecture. As you know, we have a deadline for the practical assignment, which is about due on the 31st of December, and 12 o'clock. You will hopefully mail me your essays. The essays that I'm receiving from you are very good looking. They look good, and it looks quite all right. Obviously, I haven't read them word by word, but as far as I can see, the structure, the layout, all looks good. So don't forget to send me your practical assignment, your essay, and if you have any questions concerning the essay, you can ask your questions down below in the chat session. So we can answer your questions and everyone can profit from your questions. And trust me, if you have a question, it means probably there is someone else in the classroom who also has the same question. So actually you're helping others by asking your question. So if you have questions, please ask your question. So last time we talked about religion, the chapter religion in the book of Colander. But before going into that, let's do a little bit of summary. So we said last time, if you send me an essay, this is how I would like to see it. So there is a main title and there is a subtitle, maybe. Your name, surname, number, school, department, year, subject, and date. This is all the information I need to grade your essay. And it's important because that's how I can judge whose essay this is, and following that I can look into the essay itself. So the essay is approximately 2-page essay. We talked about this, and I rather see heading, paragraph, maybe another paragraph, and then another heading, paragraphs. So it's all built on layers on top of each other. So I can understand the argumentation, so I can understand the structure, the thought line, and the question that you're going to answer in your essay. So as I said, the essays that I have received look very good. So I'm proud of you. I'm very happy. Please keep on sending me your essays. Don't forget to use the Chicago manual style for footnote system and bibliography. That's going to be majorly important because I see in your essays that you're not really using the Chicago manual of style. For that reason, you can use Zotero. You know that. And if you have any questions, you can always go back to the video that we made on Zotero. But try to use Chicago manual style in your essay. And then let's move on to what we've discussed last week. We talked about religion and society. We said that religion can both be disruptive as well as integrative. So it can be a disruptive force, but it can also be used to integrate and stabilize nations and cultures. So this is characteristic to the term religion, and religion contains ethical and moral values which over the centuries are modified and given greater vitality by the teachings of religions. So religions have positive as well as sometimes social negative effects. Because of religions, we have religious wars, 30 years wars, 80 years wars, and but majorly during peacetime, it's also a very effective factor to integrate and stabilize nations. And religions have ethical and moral values, and moral values, ethical values are kind of behavioral software for individuals for how to behave in society. So religion's integrative force derives from these ethical and moral principles, and the fact that people follow these norms and values to these principles maintain an orderly society. So as I said, order comes from stability and harmony within a society, and it keeps and maintains a level of civilization that is being achieved. So religion has a great deal of influence on individuals, and because it has a great deal of influence on individuals, it has a great deal of influence on families, groups, communities, society at large, and the nation, maybe the whole globe. Religion also has impact, therefore, on economy and political institutions. There is one interesting theory by Max Weber, in his book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. In this book, Weber talks that the Protestant sect denomination that was developed because of the Reformation has contributed greatly to the economic prosperity of Britain, which was the first country that industrialized in 1750. And the Protestant ethic, he says, is because God expects good Christians to work hard. So I recognize this argument in the Netherlands. As you know, the Netherlands is a very small country, but it has a great influence in the world. Think of Unilever, think of Shell, think of lots of multinational companies that belong to the Netherlands. And the Dutch people are very, very hard-working people. They will get up early in the morning and they will keep on working late in the evening. So the Netherlands used to be a Protestant country. So Netherlands was one of the first rebellious countries fighting against Spain. The Habsburg Empire, and there were 30 years wars and 80 years wars that the Netherlands has fought against the Catholic Spain, trying to be independent, and this was the struggle to become independent. And Max Weber says that this Protestant ethics inherently meant that people believed that God wanted them to work very, very hard, and save their investments, save their capital, and show business initiative, ideals and individualism, private enterprise, and financial success. So you can see the relationship by Max Weber as a theory that there is a relationship between religious values, religious ethics, and the life on earth, in terms of working very hard and being business minded. So obviously it didn't always work out very well. There are dark chapters from that perspective of a couple of centuries. Needless to say, we know that colonialism was part of that dark history. That should also be mentioned in this context. But from our perspective, from the perspective of the book that we're studying, Colander, we can make a relationship. We can set a relationship between religion, moral values that are dictated by religion as a source, and therefore also can be a source for social change in terms of economics and in terms of society as well as politics. We will see that in a bit. So today we are talking about stratification. Stratification comes from actually the word strata or stratum. Stratification, strata means literally layers. and these with social stratification we mean the groups within society. So you have the society, and within the society you have different layers of groups of people, right? So these are different strata in society, and social stratification also means that between these social groups, communities, or layers, there are differences and similarities. These similarities and differences could be in terms of income, it could be in terms of life, age, gender, race, income, economic, political, ideological, religious, etc. So stratification in the sense of is a sense of differentiation, is not, it doesn't have to be necessarily bad, but we believe as scholars that the society is constructed the way it is because of historical and conditional circumstantial factors. So there is a society, and within that society you have naturally similarities and differences. So that could be quite natural. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but it becomes really, really bad when people start to complain on a national level. In a way, differentiation could be, diversity, plurality. So if you have a society where you have Christians, Muslims, atheists, and you have other people living side by side, blacks, whites, Asians, Africans living side by side, there are countries that are good examples of melting pot. It's a pot, it's a pot where all these differences have been accepted by various people. It becomes really bad when people start to discriminate, when people start to use nationalism or right-wing populistic ideologies to differentiate in negative terms. Then it becomes really problematic. So for scholars, for you as a political scientist, as a scholar of international relations, social stratification is an instrument, is something that you can use to look at society with the purpose of understanding the society. So sometimes we want to understand how a society is constructed and why it is constructed the way it is, so we can make predictions about the future. Is it going to cause problems? Is it going to be okay? And so on and so forth. But these are the domains, I think, that in terms of judgment, bad or good, points that we could think of. But for our purposes, we're interested in diversification, in stratification, to understand the society. So you can look at your own society from that perspective as well. And it is unfortunate that within this diversification, stratification in this society, there are some activities, some work maybe in our societies that are considered more important than others. And now we start, come into a domain of when people start to complain about the differences and maybe inequalities. And some of these jobs, some of this work are respected highly, and some of these are not respected very much. Some of these jobs require special training, experience. For example, maybe political offices, politicians. This is a concern for me most of the time. I believe that when we think of the political governance, that not everyone should be eligible to be elected. Well, I have seen When I've seen in the corporate world, when they select a CEO or maybe a manager, when there is this job application, there is a procedure. So people get selected, and the best person for the job is selected for that position. But when we think of politics, anyone could actually be elected, and it doesn't always work in our interest. Think of Hitler, who came into parliament by ways of democracy. So, but this is another debate, right? I would rather have an exam or a selection procedure to select out those who are sane and those who are insane. But anyhow, in our societies, there is a structure, and there are jobs that are considered important, and there are jobs that are considered not important. So this could be problematic, because those who do so-called important jobs could acquire prestige and power. They could earn averagely more money. They could have a higher income compared to other people, and they could have certain privileges. This could become an attitude, a culture, an elite culture, aristocratic attitude, and modes of living. And these people could entrench. They could set their foot into earth, entrench themselves, become very powerful, and not willing to leave that position for a very, very, very long time. And we see this with dictators, with authoritarian types of figures, and they would do anything to legalize, to legitimize their own personal position by means of legal and religious sanctions. But even without these safeguards, they can often pass their superior position status along to their own children, and that's not good. So, when we discuss stratification, the term estate is important for you. Refers not to land, not a state in terms of land, geography, but in this case, a state means groups of nobility, groups within society, all those layers, stratas, nobility, the clergy, merchants, artisans, and peasants. The estate stratification system was developed first in Europe under feudalism, monarchies, and kings. People used to belong to certain estates, strata, social layers, and its place in the social hierarchy. So there was a certain hierarchy, were determined chiefly by customs, occupation, jobs, rights, and obligations with respect to agricultural economy, land, and other legal sanctions that were actually either religious or feudal. The medieval estate system, with its relatively rigid social categories, was better suited to a static than to a dynamic society. So by dynamic society, we mean mobilization, right? It could be vertical mobilization or it could be horizontal mobilization. Horizontal mobilization is when people migrate from land to cities, and vertical mobilization could be upward mobility of individuals within a city, society, from low-income jobs to high-income jobs, or political status or economical status or social status. So we have seen this in our previous lectures by means of industrial revolution, which caused both horizontal mobility, as well as vertical mobility. And that's how this idea of democracy came into being. Democracy actually was a word, and people wanted justice, equality, freedom, equal opportunities, and freedom, and with all the emphasis of these words. So democracy was actually how are we going to redistribute the resources that we have so that we don't have too much of inequality or dependence. How can we assure that kind of type of freedom within economy, society, and politics? And politics was in that sense the protector of the people. So the power did not lie within politicians; it lay amongst people, and people delegated that power, that authority, to politicians who were elected temporarily. You see, and their job was to look after the citizens, protect the citizen of that nation, of that country. So we have different types of stratification. Probably one of the most rigid, most fundamental would be a caste associated with India, approximately 3,000 years old, and based on birth and wealth. So in this kind of stratification, in the caste-based system, which was actually banned in the 1950s, and additional laws were passed against it, it still remains very rigid in the Indian subcontinental India, in the current society. So the caste system is based on three ideas: dharma, karma, and transmigration. Dharma is the law that sustains the system. Karma refers to the actions of the person and the duties and your membership in a layer, in a caste. And transmigration is the idea that if a person fulfills its worldly duties, the person will be reincarnated into a higher caste. So dharma, karma, and transmigration are the three principal ideas for the caste system. So it means if you were born into a low caste system, for example, the feet of the working part of the caste system, there was absolutely no way for that person to move up the ladder. So the person will have to die first, in order to get into a better position, to be reincarnated as a higher individual. That's the only way to move upward. The person has to die first. Okay, types of social stratification, we said. There is another example that we can take a look at the colonial past, how the Black community, Black Americans ended up in the United States, and especially the Black people from the time of slavery, especially in the South, have been called a caste. You could use the word outcast, casted out, outcast. There are interesting literature about this concept, but they were actually considered outside the society because of their birth and socially underprivileged, being underprivileged group. It was impossible for them. It was not possible for them to enter groups predominantly occupied by the white people. Another example would be apartheid system. Apartheid system is a separation of the races. As you know, in South Africa, Zimbabwe, well, it existed in some African countries such as Zimbabwe and South Africa. And according to the apartheid system, blacks could not hold same jobs or live in the same places as whites, and their interrelations with whites were severely limited. The apartheid was abolished in 1990s in South Africa. And I will give you one example. Right now, we live in times of pandemics, the COVID-19. And apartheid, one of the reasons that apartheid came into being was the bubonic plague. So there was a plague, and which was a reason for the white communities to cast out the blacks from this was just one reason, and they started to segregate the neighborhoods, and that idea of apartheid remained. So we can also relate to that, and there are many theories about how pandemics could influence the weakest links within the society for reasons of discrimination. Today, we somehow experience this slightly in Europe as well, especially extreme right political parties. They blame Muslim communities for spreading the disease, and that the Muslims, because they don't care about or believe in the COVID-19, that they occupy hospital rooms, IC rooms that were actually meant for the Europeans. These debates, public debates, are taking place in our societies, unfortunately. Moving on. So we're still talking about social classes today. The modern, with modern we mean industrialized, right? So industrialized societies. Scholarly, we could say there are no real rigid formal stratification. We have diversification. We say we have plurality, etc. We have multicultural societies, but not really rigid caste systems or apartheid kind of stratification. We do talk about social class. Unlike estates and castes, these social classes are not supported by any legal or religious sanctions. They're not clear-cut. They are delimited, meaning we don't have a specific definition of what we mean by social classes. I mean, there are many different identifications or definitions or indicators, but we don't usually agree on what it should be. So there is a lot of disagreement on what social classes should be recognized as. So in European societies, social status is a continuum. A continuum means that individuals and families are scattered along a line from bottom to top, from top to bottom. So there is you could be able to follow a structural line. It's like a continuous variable, all linked to each other, following a path. Okay, so it's not discrete, it's continuous in that sense. But we will discuss about this continuous structure of social class today. We are half an hour. We've been talking about for half an hour now. So this is one picture of what we mean by social class amongst scholars. So a scholar, a political scientist, a sociologist could use something of this kind of a conceptual model. A conceptual model is a visual aid, an instrument to look at. So this could be one model. So you see that we have education, we have occupation, we have income, and we have socioeconomic status. So education, when you look at the bottom of that diamond shape, so you see a diamond shape. So you could think, why isn't it a pyramid? The reason for that is that nowadays it used to be a pyramid. So there were, in terms of education, the bottom part of the social layer was much larger than the top part. But we have moved quite a long ways from the pyramid shape into a diamond shape. And according to this, you have, for example, at the bottom, high school dropouts, person who did not graduate, a person who graduated from high school, maybe a lyceum, a gymnasium, some type of college, and then completed college. So in that sense, if a person has graduated from university, it would end up higher in that diamond shape, okay? So you can see that a professional is a person who went on studying in terms of education. So you have, in terms of jobs, occupation, unskilled, semi-skilled, half-skilled, not really well-skilled, skilled trade, professional. You have white collar, a bureaucrat, a person who wears white shirt, a tie, and works at a government office, maybe. A manager, maybe a person who manages, gives, has a responsible position within a corporation or a government agency. And then you have a person who's professional, who is specialized in the work that a person does. Income, so you have poverty line. A poverty line would be, so you have a minimum wage in every society. So if you'd be under that, you'd be considered poor. And then you have low, that would be somewhere around or above the minimum wage. And then you have the median wage. Median, let's remember what is median. Median means the number that is exactly in the middle of a continuum. Okay, so it occurs quite often. So it's right in the middle, right there. So you don't take the average. It's not the modus. It's not the average that you would add up all the numbers and you would come up with an average. That's not median. So that's an average. We don't look at the average. We don't look at the modus. Modus would be the number that occurs the most often. We don't look at the modus. We look at the median. Median number is exactly in the middle. The number that's in the middle. So that's the median income, in the middle, exactly. Statistically, it's very interesting. And then you have high income, and underclass, working class, middle class, upper class. So a person, so if you add up education, occupation, income, it would add up to socioeconomic status, okay? So if a person is a professional, high education, high occupation, professional occupation, high income, that would be upper class. If a person is in that upper part, it's in the upper or the middle part of the socioeconomic status. So on the contrary, if a person is under the diamond shape, it would obviously be the underclass or the working class. So that's what we mean by social classes from this scholarly perspective. So again, this is not definite. This is not exact science. This is just something that we use as an instrument. There are many other instruments, but this is just one model, okay? This is one way of looking at social classes. So if we face now the question of income inequality, and we look at the history, we see that the 17th and the 18th centuries, with most people at the bottom, were at the bottom in terms of education, income, and social position, and very few at the top could be reasonably well represented. It could have been a pyramid, and as you can see, it's now diamond shaped because many people at the bottom have moved up. And as you can see, they have moved up where? In that middle section. And that middle section is the median. Okay, so that's the median part, the middle section. That's crucial to understand for you as a political scientist. Because most people have moved education-wise upwards, occupation and income, their socioeconomic status is somewhere in the middle. So during the 1950s and 60s, a social change took place, as you know. The lower classes decreased. They moved up into the middle class, and the pyramid no longer was appropriate to represent the situation. To capture that change, scholars started to use the diamond shape, suggesting that the majority of people fell in the middle class, the median part, with smaller upper and lower classes. So there was a huge expectation that the lower classes would continue to shrink. So there was a big expectation that people would start, moving upwards into the median, having that bigger middle class. But it didn't happen. Those expectations were wrong. The lower classes have stopped shrinking as upward social mobility has slowed. And as immigration has increased in the United States, that's one of the reasons for why upward mobility slowed down, because most people who were at the bottom, they were not able to move upward because of changing social conditions. We will talk about this, but this was one of the reasons that it didn't really happen. Moving on, so we define a social class as consisting of those people in a community who are somewhat similar in their economic status. So there is similarity in income, occupation, their attitudes, and the way they act, in their belief systems, religious purposes, maybe ideological, maybe, and their educational achievements. Their ways of living were similar. The regard in which others hold them and their power of or lack of power to influence community affairs. So they would also resemble in terms of being able to influence politics or not being able to influence politics or social movements, ideas, ideologies, etc. So if we think of the upper class as a social class, they would probably be in the higher segments of income, occupation, professional life, standards of living, higher socioeconomic position, and they would probably be more able to influence society with their ideas because they're influential. That wouldn't be the case for lower level social classes. I'm going to give you an example of median in a second. I will get back to your question because median is very important. Very good. But this is the definition of a social class. Please remember that. Therefore, a social class is a subculture. So it's part of the bigger culture. People whose social statuses are similar, live in the same neighborhoods, associate largely with one another, and marry to each other. But they're also likely to show similarities of speech, dialect, manners, traditions, moral standards are comparable with people who are, in the same segment of social status, they would differ in that sense in their way of living from other classes. So there would be either similarities or differences. So similarities in group, differences intra-group. So stratification represents also, it also means superiority or inferiority relationships. And according to some scholars, it can be compared to a cake, the layers in a cake, okay? At the top of the cake is a thin layer. It's a thin, small layer consisting of a small group of people who have the highest economic of social status. There are not too many. It's a small percentage. At the bottom of the cake is another thin layer. We have seen the diamond shape, right? So it's a small part there, and it's a slightly larger part at the bottom. But the bigger, section is in the median section at the middle, Finland representing those whose economic and social status is very low, and whom the community regards as of little account. So it's a pity that people at the bottom, don't get much attention because they don't have the influence they should have in the community or in society. Between these two extremes at various levels, there are thick layers which represent the great majority of the population. The chief objection to this analogy is that the divisions between social classes are not as definite. But you should remember these are not rigid layers. So if a person wants to move from the bottom layer to the middle section, it is possible. It should be possible. If a person wants to move from the middle section to the upper section, it should be possible. It is possible. I mean, we have in the meantime, in the time period that we live, we have the idea, the open social attitude that the son of a laborer can become an academic, a scholar. We have seen the son of a laborer in Germany who discovered the vaccine for the COVID-19 was the son of a laborer from Anatolia, from Turkey, right? So there is the possibility. There is a possibility to move up or down. Okay, so it's not like a caste system. So it's not definite. And to classify individuals into socioeconomic classes, scholars average a variety of characteristics. We talked about this, the diamond shapes, remember? This is normally done by a weighing system. Points are allocated. So what we do usually is we ask people what kind of education, what kind of job, what kind of income the person could have, and then we point them. For example, if a person has advanced education, has high income and high education, it gets points for high education, lots of points for high education, and lots of points for high income. But it is quite possible that a person is low education and high income, right? Then they could be, there is a possibility that a person who has high education, low income, and a person who has a low education and high income end up in the same class social structure. So typically we say upper class, upper middle class, lower middle class, and lower class. So in a way, upper class, middle class, and lower class. And then there is this transitions into from one to the other. That's a transition. Okay. Some of the characteristics looked at are occupation, source of income, type of housing, the area within which the subject lives. Okay, let's take a look at this. And this is, Dokan, an answer to your question. For example, you have elite. You could also, this is another model. You have the elite, that's 5% of a society usually. Like, likely occupation, doctors, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, likely education, 17 or more years. Approximate annual income, $400,000 or euros a year. This would be elite. This is a very small percentage of the society, okay? And residential neighborhood, very elite neighborhood, expensive houses, gated communities, etc. They would probably read Wall Street Journal. So these are indicators, okay? So when a scholar looks at the society, we try to look at, these factors, these indicators. These are just indication of dimensions which we use to identify, to define what is elite. Okay, the upper middle class, 20% of the population, small business people, teachers, lawyers, professors, managers of small firms. They have around 16 years of high-ranked college between 100,000 and 500,000 income, and good neighborhoods. They would probably read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, etc. So the middle class, 35%. So when you look at this is the number exactly in the middle, median. Okay. So when you look 5, 20, 35, 25, 50, the exact middle point would be 35. So that's the median class. Middle class would be a person, administrative clerk, chain store manager, technician, salespeople, high school, lower ranked college, average income, private homes, medium-sized, local paper, lower class, 25% of the population, low-skilled labor, part-time employees, and close to minimum wage jobs, 10 to 12 years of schooling, 20,000 to 40,000 hourly wages. They wouldn't get a salary, but hourly wage, apartments, small tract homes, trailers, local newspapers, and then you have unskilled labor, 15%, 8 to 12 years, under 20,000, blighted areas, poor apartments, no reading. So the reason why the median section is important is if you were a politician and you're going to elections, right? Which one of these groups would be most important as a voter for you? Most politicians, they make propaganda strategy, political strategies to communicate, especially to the interests of the median voter. The median voter is the voter that is the most interesting because that's the middle section of the of the class. So the public officials are not really. It could be a public official could, it depends. I don't know the exact situation in Turkey, but in Europe, the middle class would be absolutely bureaucrats as well, because they are, exactly administrative clerks, public officials, bureaucrats, etc. So when a politician goes into a political campaign, they usually go for the median voter. Okay, so that's why the median voter, the median section is very, very important for political science scholars. So try to focus on that in the next, campaigns and elections, and you will probably see what we're seeing right now as well from a scientific perspective. Okay, so we have 10 more minutes. We will try to talk a little bit more about social classes and mobility. As one moves lower on the class ladder, so there's movement. We said there is movement, social mobility on the ladder, class ladder. One moves farther away from these characteristics. So if a person goes down on the ladder, probably the person is moving away from job, work, and children do not have a stable family life. So it's very important if you want to move up the social ladder, and a person who wants to move up in a social ladder comes from a family that is not really stable family life, there is a chance it's not going to happen. It's not impossible, but as rational, logically, there must be something unique to that individual to move upward. I could give you an example, but I'm not going to give you an example right now. But this is important from scholarly perspective. When a person moves down, you move away from job perspective, income perspective, there is a high chance that the family life is not stable, it's not harmonious. There is no religious life. The social nature of the community is not interesting. An explanation is that the elite, the higher section, those who earn a lot, higher income section, tend to make decisions, or political elite, they make decisions on the basis of their atypical life. So it's not a typical life they have. They have luxurious maybe lives, and they will make decisions based on such a atypical life, as if everyone were like them. So there is this way of looking at life from their own perspective and experience. This is important because the elite hold a disproportionate amount of power over decisions that society makes. So there is a big chance that they make decisions for their own interest, to protect their own interests. To fix the inequality, and this creates inequality, to fix the inequality through government is not enough. So if you go and wait that things will get better, it's not going to happen. So from a scholarly perspective, there is a need for civic great awakening. So democracy is an idea, and the idea suggests that people are born free, they have equal opportunities, and social conditions should be right for everyone to be able to move up on that social ladder. If it doesn't happen, then there's something wrong, and it's not going to be fixed by itself. And as we know from revolutions, the revolutions are consequences of such inequalities, and people come to such decisions because they've had enough and they want a change, a social change. And this could be dramatic. It doesn't have to be, sometimes revolutions are not good, but sometimes, most of the time, social change does happen because democracy functions, because political elites know what people need. So they make policies. If you have that balance, political balance, equilibrium, that politicians are sensitive for what people need and expect from politics, there should be a healthy balance. But sometimes, especially the people at the bottom, they have this waiting attitude. And this study, there is a name and there is a study in your book, and this study states waiting for the government initiative is not going to cut it. It's not going to work. So a civic awakening is something which is stated by your book that will reintegrate the elite with the other classes and help spread the elite values, or make the political elite understand that the people need their help. The diagnosis that countries become more separated, unequal distribution, fits this perception. So there is this perception, ladies and gentlemen, in the world, around the world, that most countries are in a situation where the unequal distribution, inequality amongst people, amongst the social classes, have been increasing. So it's been increasing for a very long time, and this perception is becoming global. And this issue needs to enter the public debate. So I gave you the example last time of this book, and this book tells the story, this exact story, that inequality, unequal distribution of resources in relation to politics isn't working as it's supposed to work around the world. And this is a new book. And this book is going to be translated into Turkish. So it's not translated yet. But this year, it will be translated into Turkish language. But, it's very interesting because this is something that is entering the debate as we speak in the whole wide world. And that's why China is interesting too, because China has helped almost 1 billion Chinese poor people into economic stability. and I have books here. When I was in China, Xi Jinping wrote a book, and that book you can only find in China. I got that book. Yes, this book is called. Oh, something went wrong, guys. Okay, something just went wrong. Sorry about that. So I was writing. So this is the book, The Wolf at the Door, um, and um, and this is right now something that is um, being discussed around the whole wide world, and this is a big problem. This is going to be discussed a lot, and if I don't have the book right now with me of Xi Jinping, the leader, the Chinese leader of of the Communist Party in China. He wrote a book and he talks about communism and how communism has elevated the state capitalist style of working, has elevated a billion of Chinese people from poverty. I will try to show you that book as well. It's interesting to know that such literature is around. I don't think that you will be able to find it, but we'll see. Guys, we will continue next week, and I hope that you will be fine, and I hope to see your essays on time. Your essays look good, and I'm happy with those essays, but try to look into Chicago manual style and use citation, references, footnotes as well. I do get questions about citations, but try to stick to what I have told you about how to cite. So you're just narrating the arguments of authors and scholars from other books. I don't want too many books, not too many studies. Just focus on your essay and try to make it good structure, logical, well written, and then we will take it from that. I hope to see you guys next week. Have a good weekend. Yes, I will do it right now because 10 and 11. Okay. I will upload them as soon as we're done here. I will upload them into the classroom as well as student portal, okay? I'm grateful for you for listening. There are many students here, 38. I'm happy with you guys. You guys are really great. I really hope to meet you guys next year. Thank you. Take care, people. Bye-bye.